I can log into it.
You can get her email. You want me to get her email?
Yeah, just want to email it to me.
The presentation?
So no Chief Highland, is Cody doing it?
Creighton Durham is the 21, 27.
Oh, we're on.
Creighton Durham. Wow. They're pretty good.
All right, calling to order the March 18th, 2025 meeting of the Long Lake City Council. Good evening, everyone. It's 6:30 p.m. All council members are present. Item 2 is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item number 3 is mayor comments. Thank you, Brian. Long Lake News, meeting review, and updates. I'll just give a few, nothing overall happening in the city on a grand scale over the last couple weeks. Since our last meeting, I'll just give a couple updates on some meetings I've been to. Last Wednesday, I was at the Northwest Hennepin League of Municipalities monthly meeting. We had a really good presentation from the Hennepin County Assessor talking about the upcoming 2024 assessment report for properties in Hennepin County. Long Lake had kind of a typical increase in property values as compared to neighboring cities. I think it was in the 2 to 3% range, and we had a couple of anomalies as far as some commercial properties having some really big increases since the last report. That report will be publicly available on the Hennepin County website later this week for anyone to see. On Thursday, I presented at the Wayzata West Metro Chamber of Commerce, their annual Meet the Mayors State of the City's Leadership Luncheon. I, along with the mayors of Wayzata and Plymouth and Minnetonka, gave updates on what's going on in our cities and answered Q&A from the audience. So that was a nice event. Appreciate the invitation to that. Really good way for our 4 cities to showcase, and we have a lot of businesses in our cities, of course, that are members of that chamber, as well as our own Long Lake area of Chamber of Commerce. So it was a great event there. And then yesterday I attended a meeting with our state senator, Ann Johnson Stewart. She called a meeting of all the mayors in her Senate District 45. It was at the Minnetonka City Hall. We had a great meeting there where we talked about some of the issues just going down at the Capitol and bonding bill and status of that. A lot of talk about e-bikes. Apparently a lot of communities in the district, mostly kind of Wayzata and Southern Lake Minnetonka communities, are having a lot of issues with e-bikes. So far we seem to have escaped that. Other good topics there as well, so we appreciated the invite to that. So besides that, that's major updates there for the mayor's comments. With that, we'll move on to item 4, which is to approve this evening's agenda. I'll entertain a motion to do so.
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Second.
All right, a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item 5, consent agenda. There's items A through F on the consent agenda this evening. Any questions for staff regarding items on the consent agenda? And if not, I'll entertain a motion to approve this evening's consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right. 6, open correspondence. Open correspondence is an item on the agenda during which the public may address the city council. No formal action is taken by the city council, and comments should be limited to 5 minutes or less. And open correspondence comments may also be emailed to city staff by noon on the date of the meeting. Anyone wish to approach for open comments or open correspondence? All right. Any submitted open correspondence, Scott?
No.
All right. All right. On to item 7, regular business. 7A, receive and accept the 2024 audited financial report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm pleased to announce that we have the completion of the 2024 annual audit, and it was conducted by Abdo LLP. Tonight, we are pleased to have Andy Berg, the auditing partner, with us. to give a comprehensive overview of this year's audit findings, as well as to answer any questions that you may have. Andy?
All right, welcome, Andy.
Thank you. So I got the presentation up on the screen. I believe you have that in your packets. So what I'll cover today is audit results. We'll look at your general fund, a number of different financial metrics there over the last 3 years. Look at your other governmental funds, mainly looking at the change in fund balance year over year. And then your enterprise funds, your water, sewer, storm, looking at cash flows from operations and your ending cash balances. And then some key performance metrics compared to other cities in Hennepin County and throughout the state, a similar population. So the end result is that we issue an opinion on your financial statements. We issued an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion, so the best opinion you can get. As part of that, we also issue a report on Minnesota legal compliance, testing 7 different categories that the state auditor has us test, anywhere from cash and investments, contract and bidding, debt and outstanding debt there. So those are some of the bigger ones. Clean report there, so no Minnesota legal compliance findings. As part of the audit, we don't test your internal controls, but we do gain an understanding of them. There are 2 internal control findings, which are really the same as last year and really very common in small to medium-sized organizations. From a council standpoint, I think it's important to be aware of these, pay close attention to the financial information throughout the year, and then as a city, review your policies and procedures on an annual basis. So the first one there is a preparation of financial statements. So we're doing the audit and preparing your financial statements. The city does review the draft of those statements before we issue them to final, and then that's what's being brought to council tonight. And then the limited segregation of duties, really with Amanda doing the majority of all the accounting functions. That's reported there. There are controls in place, such as approval of the claims like you had on your agenda tonight, department heads approving invoices and other monitoring controls in place. So now jumping into the general fund, here we give you a 5-year comparison or 4-year comparison of your ending unrestricted fund balance, which is that yellow line there. We compare that to your next year's budget, which is the orange line. You'll see that budget has increased each of the 5 years presented. The 2025 budget is about 1.8 million. If we compare your ending unrestricted fund balance in the general fund, you're at about 52%, which is right around that minimum fund balance policy. So the black line there is your policy. You can see all the years there you were above that policy. That big decrease from 21 to 22 really was a transfer into your capital fund. We talked about that in previous years. Probably the last year we'll have to see that because that'll fall off next year, this trend, but we'll also see that when we look at your capital funds.
Do you think there's any danger of that crossing over and being under 50% then, or for next year? Or
I guess there's always that possibility, depending how the budget to actual comes in compared to your, the budget results in 2025. So that's a possibility that could happen, and you definitely want to monitor that through your reporting that you're receiving throughout the year. But based on the 25 budget, you usually are fairly close to what the budget is, and as long as the budget was, comes in fairly close, I don't see that, a huge danger there, but always something to pay attention to.
Can you transfer unrestricted funds back from the capital improvement? I mean, could you switch some funds, capital funds, back to the general fund to cover?
Yeah, if there was ever a deficit, below that, you could transfer from your capital funds back into the general fund too, correct? So if we look at the budget to actual here, and that gets back into, what would this look like in 2025? So here your total fund balance did increase 11,000 up to just over 1 million, so that ending total fund balance. Revenues came in over budget by about 164,000, total revenues at 1.8 million. Expenditures at just under the 1.8 million. over budget by about 170,000, with the bulk of that being in the public safety function. So revenues over expenditures by 18,000. You transferred out 7,300 to other city funds. Again, that all equates to about 11,000 increase in your general fund balance. And then we look at the revenue and expenditure trends over a 3-year period. The 22 is in orange, 2023 is in yellow, 2024 is in black. The graph on the left is your revenues. You'll see your main revenue source is your property taxes, which increase each of the 3 years there, just like we saw in the annual expenditure budget. Again, this shows the importance of maintaining that 50% because your property taxes come in 2 times a year, so you have to have cash flow for basically 6 months, which would equal 50% of your budget. So that's where your fund balance policy comes from. Charges for services, those have decreased each of the 3 years. The higher number back in 22 was development related. And then your other, fairly consistent with a little bit of a drop in 2024.
What is other?
So that is everything else that falls outside of that. So the biggest piece of that is interest income.
Why aren't we earning good interest in '24? I thought it would be pretty high.
Well, there's some other components in the other two.
Would that also include building permits?
No, that would
No,
be,
that was
that would
in-
be under,
Charge for services?
Charge for
yeah, charge
services?
for services.
We had a pretty high year in 2024 for interest.
Yeah, well, it was showing low though there.
I know, I'm trying to think though, in the other years, what else would have been in other?
So I don't know if you can see this up there, but the interest income was lower year over year. The total interest income may not have been because there was interest I mean, your capital fund is pretty big with over 3 million, and with that fund balance decreasing, it makes sense that there might not have been as much allocated to the general fund. But then some of the other miscellaneous stuff as contributions and donations, refunds and reimbursements, and then just other types of revenue that come in.
John, if you remember, interest is allocated by the balance that's within the account. So when we brought the balance down in the general fund, the interest that's allocated to the general fund then would go down as well.
Oh, okay.
It's not that we got less interest, it's just that the general fund itself,
Okay. Interest.
it's based on the cash balance in each fund. So as that,
So
yes.
we're still getting the interest on the other
We're still,
funds.
yeah, we had a very large year last year, but it would have been, you would have seen that then in the capital.
Okay.
And then on the expenditure side, public safety is the highest area of spending increase in 23 and 24, really related to the legal fees and related to the fire department. General government fairly consistent, increasing a little bit. Public Works did decrease over the 3 years. The higher number in 22 was also related to that development-related activity, offset with those charges for service we saw on the revenue side. And then here, the other, really the biggest piece there is that transfer out. So you'll see in 22, that's a 1 point some million transferred to your capital fund. All right, any other questions on the general fund before we move on to the special revenue funds?
So we're good.
All right, the city has 4 special revenue funds. Total ending fund balance of 271,000, an increase of 37,000 from 2023. The bulk of this is committed, as you can see down in the graph there, internally committed by the city. There is a restricted component of it too, mainly in that charitable donations collection of about 28,000. And that's restricted for specific purposes. And then we do give a budget to actual, the fire department there, we saw that fund balance increasing up to about 160,000. Total revenues at just under, or just over 1 million, over budget by about 75,000. Expenditures over budget by about 67,000. So total revenue over expenditures about 34,000, ending at 160,000 as we saw on the previous slide.
So, we underran, right, for the year?
Yes, and the auditors actually accounted for an expenditure in 2024 to, for the surplus that we had to refund. So I believe that the expense of the $101 million does include the money that we had to refund to the other cities for coming in under, we made sure that that was allocated in 2024.
And has that, but that has been paid yet, or?
We deducted it off of the second quarter billings,
Yeah,
which is
because-
actually going out today.
Right, because at our fire advisory board meeting, that question was asked of them, do you want to check, or do you want us to just, reduce your next payment? And they said, just take it off the next payment.
I did, yeah, we reduced it, the invoices are going out today.
So that is factored into the
It is.
expenditure line item is about 99,000, close to 100,000. That's additional expenses. So that really accounts for the bulk of that over the expenditures.
Okay.
And then you have 6 capital funds, with the total ending fund balance of about 5.2 million, increase about 618,000. The biggest fund there is your main capital fund at about 3.6 million. You have your TIF 1-6 with about 945,000. That's all restricted under that TIF plan. You have your pavement management improvement fund that increased about 326,000, ending at 398,000. And then you have some smaller funds there, your TIF 1-9, which is restricted, your fire capital fund, 157,000, and then your park fund about 93,000. You can see in the graph there, the bulk of it's internally assigned by the city for specific purposes, with the bulk of that, like I mentioned, in your capital project fund.
Did the fire capital fund drop because we paid for the engine that we bought? Is that what that
Yeah.
was?
Yes.
So that's engine minus interest, give or take.
All right, and then you do have 2 bonds outstanding, issued a fair number of years ago in 2016 and 2017. So total principal outstanding with governmental funds, about 481,000, maturing in 2027 and 2033. You can see the principal and interest requirements over the next 10 years. When the 2016A bond drops off, you can see that the principal and interest also drops in 2028. Again, with the debt service funds, it's always important to monitor the cash flow so you're meeting your principal and interest payments. Then we get into the enterprise funds. Like I mentioned, we'll look at the cash flow from operations, which is the top graph, and then also the cash balance over the last 4 years. So if you look at the top, the orange bar is your operating receipts coming in, so that did increase over 2023. It also covered your operating costs, the yellow bar, plus your debt service, principal and interest. So a portion of those 2 bonds we looked at on the previous slide are allocated between your enterprise funds too. So with that cash flow, you were able to generate cash flow from operations. You did have some capital expenditures in '24, which did decrease the total cash balance, but still a significant balance there of just under 1.2 million. And then there's about 96,000 that's restricted under the bond proceeds that have not been spent yet. The next slide, which I'll skip over, is really a table of the similar information. So we'll go into the sewer fund here. Again, cash flow generated from operations, looking at the top there, the 24 columns. There was an increase in rates in the sewer fund, which did help increase that cash in 2024. So positive 286,000 of unrestricted cash. Really good improvement over the last 4 years. You were at a deficit of 182,000. So good progress in the sewer fund.
Great.
And then your surface water fund, again, the operating receipts went up, just like the other enterprise funds, generating cash flow from operations and covering your debt service. And the cash increasing up to about 200,000 for the unrestricted portion of that cash. And then your recycling fund, again here showing some good improvements. The previous 3 years you were at a cash deficit. That deficit is eliminated and you have a positive $14,000 in the recycling fund. So good to see some financial improvements in this fund too. This graph gives you a 3-year picture of your total cash and investments by all those different fund types that we talked about. So in total, the city as a whole has about 8.8 million of cash and investments at the end of 2024, up from about 7.9 million in 2023, fairly close in 2022. The yellow portion of the bar is those capital funds that we looked at, and that's where the bulk of, when we're talking about the interest allocation earned on the investments, that's where the bulk of it gets allocated to those funds on its proportionate share. And then the last piece is looking at some of the KPIs. The orange is other cities in the 4th class throughout the state of Minnesota. And then the yellow is the cities in Hennepin County. And then the city of Long Lake is indicated by the black line. So 2 tax ones here. The one on the left is your tax rate. You'll see very consistent over the last 4 years for the city of Long Lake, under both those peer groups for comparison. And then the taxes per capita has increased each of the last 4 years, right in line with similar trends to the peer group. There is just 2 years of peer group data. We don't have the information from the state auditor yet for the 23, but that will be included in next year's report. A couple debt indicators here. Like we mentioned, you haven't issued debt in quite a while, so that the long-term debt per capita has decreased each of the 4 years presented as you're paying down the principal on those bonds. And then looking at the debt service expenditures as a percent of current expenditures, so your principal and interest payments, that's also decreasing and a fair amount below the peer groups presented there. And then the last 2 are looking at your expenditures in your governmental funds, so your general fund, special revenue, and capital projects. Your current expenditures per capita increase each of the 4 years presented there, similar to what the general fund budget is, where the majority of those expenditures are. Consistent trend being a little bit higher than the peer group presented. And then your capital expenditures per capita, that's going to vary depending on the type of projects and items you purchase there. So you see that was a little bit higher in 23, dropped down some in 24, and that can fluctuate with that peer group, but really below the peer group that's presented there.
Yeah, I was curious about that one, Andy. So why, like in the capital expenditures per capita, why is ours so much lower compared to the other class 4 cities? Like what are examples of what their capital expenditures are that we don't have, or any simple answer to that, or not necessarily?
The simple answer is that really when you bring them all together and average it out, that average over a period of years kind of stays the same. But if you went into each individual city, it's going to vary depending on if they have a street project going on or not. Some cities, growing cities, will have more street projects on a consistent basis. Some that are, just doing redevelopment on some of them, it's not going to happen as consistent over time. So it really depends on the type of city you are, the growth that's going on. But comparing to that peer group, it really gets averaged out with some cities having some in 1 year and others in the next. And that's why comparing to that KPI stays more consistent than an individual city would.
Okay. Thanks.
So with that, I'd be happy to take any further questions that you have.
Great. Other questions for Andy? Consents. I think I talked to Tyler about this for our last audit, but is there, like, the slides are great and there's a lot of data on the slides, but I didn't look at every nook and cranny of the report. Is is some of the, like the debt per capita and those kind of, some of those figures are in the slides. Did they make their way into the actual report as well this year, do you think? Or any, you remember any?
Actual
change?
financial statements.
Right.
Yeah, the peer group's not gonna be in the actual financial statements, but all those numbers tie back into the financial, they're calculated from the numbers that are within the actual financial statements.
Okay. All right, great. Any other questions for Andy? All right. Staff, anything you want to mention? Any follow-up to what Andy said, or?
I don't think so. I think it went great.
Yeah, good work with the water, getting the water fund balances up, or the sewer, and that sort of thing. We're seeing some positive improvements based on all the work everybody's been putting into our rate structures and everything. So it's good to see some positives out of that. And great. All right. Well, thanks, Andy.
All right, thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Okay, move on to item 7B, 2024 Lund Lake Fire Department Annual Report and Year in Review. Chief Farley, are you the presenter on this? All right.
Oh, that might.
I can do it. I got it.
Yeah. Last, we'll see you later.
See ya.
Bye, Andy. Thank you.
Yeah, council, thanks for having me. The chief was a little under the weather today, so I asked if I would fill in for him. Happy to do so, of course. So yeah, our annual review this year of 2024 for the Long Lake Fire Department. And it was, as always, a busy one. Never a shortage of things happening and items to take care of. So leadership team remains the same as it has been, as it was last year. We have 3 lieutenants there. We've got Jeff Kroll, Matt Smiley, and Ben Veach. 2 captains, Ted Wycheck and Ryan Hoster. Our chief of training, Scott Spinks. Chief of administration, Ryan Gonzer. Our battalion chief, John Paskowitz. Myself, assistant chief, Cody Farley, and all under the leadership of Mike Highland. Currently, we're sitting at 38 members, minimum certification levels of Firefighter 2, either EMT or EMR. That's the personal decision on the firefighter, how much time they want to dedicate to their training in that aspect. And then hazardous materials. Current breakdown, we have 6 probationary firefighters who will likely come off probation in 2025 here, and 10 responders at Station 2 and 28 responders at Station 1. And as a point of reference, our full staffing would be 50 members, with 30 members at Station 1 and 20 members at Station 2. So we'll be doing a fair amount of recruiting over the 2025 year to try to build up our numbers. There's a breakdown of years of service, which actually looks pretty favorable. To have over a quarter of our membership with 10 or more years of experience is a really great thing, and over half of our membership of 5 or more years of experience. So a pretty good breadth of knowledge and ability there. So 2024, the way it broke down, so we responded to, as a department, 466 calls, which is a drop from last year, but only because of the split in call area. And if you take the entire call area into account, we beat last year's record, which exceeded the previous year's record. So we're on about a 3 or 4 year sprint of increasing call volume. So the high runners in terms of activity are the Category 300, which is medical calls. That year over year is the big winner in terms of number of responses we have. And typically followed with cancellations or situations where there was not actually an emergency situation. So canceled, or we arrived on scene to discover that there was not actually anything that needed to be taken care of. And third behind that is alarms, things like nuisance, burn dinner, things like that. So those are typically the heavy hitting categories, and 2024 was no exception for them. Long Lake last year came out with 84 calls, and that was 18% of our total call volume. Orono was in the lead with 291 calls, and that was 62% of our call volume. And then Minnetonka Beach at 8%, Medina with 6%, and Mutual Aid with 5%. So, any questions about how things broke down in terms of the calls we responded to?
I guess not.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, so it was an increase in call volume over previous years, and here you can see that we're in about really a 5-year period of increasing call volume. And prior to that, it was fairly steady, hovering around 400 to 440 calls per year. But every year since, we've had a pretty good uptick, and a little bit of increase in certain categories, and the larger increases in the two top running categories. So the category 300, which again is medicals, and 600, which is nothing found. So we were called into service, but there wasn't in fact a situation to be taken care of. So those are the groups that are increasing faster than the rest. And the top line, so we have 2024, which is calls that Long Lake Fire responded to, and then the 2024 E, I took into account all of the calls that both Long Lake and Orono Fire Departments responded to, which would make the comparison equal to previous years. So you can see that our top curve would have been our entire call area for 2024, which again increases year over year. So. We do interact a lot with our neighbors, so 25 times we were interacting with them on calls. They're broken into auto aid and mutual aid here. Automatic aid is a pre-existing arrangement where when we would be called into service, our neighbor would be called into service at the same time, or vice versa. They would be called into service and we would be called into service at the same time to help them. So that's automatic aid versus mutual aid, where we would get onto a scene and then specifically request the aid of our neighboring departments. That would be mutual aid. So we were out helping our neighbors 15 times, and then we called our neighbors in to help us 10 times last year. So great longstanding partnerships with our neighbors in that regard. And we put that all into use just last week with that large house fire up on Homestead. I believe we had 5 or 6 neighboring departments helping us out on that one. And some of them were automatic aid and some of them were mutual aid. So how we responded last year, overall, it's very much right on par with what we'd expect. Year over year, we're right around 8 minutes. Long Lake was a little bit of a shining star here, 6 minutes and 44 seconds. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, Minnetonka Beach. So I would attribute the Minnetonka Beach slower response time just due to the situation between Orono and Long Lake and the effect that has had on Station 2. Station 2 being our primary response station for Minnetonka Beach. So when Station 1 needs to come down and ultimately be the first responding unit in Minnetonka Beach, it just takes us longer because we're further away. So that's where that increased number came from.
And we lost some members from Station 2 in the last year or so, right?
Yep, correct.
Several
So like
members.
that previous slide said, we're at 10 responding members at Station 2, and we'd like to be at 20. So that definitely has an effect. And it is a metric that we pay attention to, is the number of responders per incident. Of course, if we have more people attending any given incident, likely we'll get a truck out the door faster and arrive on scene quicker. So we do pay attention to that, and broken down here, daytime versus nighttime. Daytime being the time when we can expect a lot of paid on-call members to be not able to respond. They're out attending to their normal daytime jobs, versus nighttime, we'd expect most paid on-call firefighters to be able to respond. So we do see that breakdown like we'd expect with more responders during the evening versus during the daytime. We hope to be minimum 30%, and we'd like to be leaning towards 35 or higher % for a response and for any given incident. So that nighttime with a 34% response is pretty good. We're feeling pretty good about that. One interesting thing that came from looking at our responders per time of day was also the calls during the time of day, so the call volume during time of day. And you can see there we have 60% of our calls coming between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., which is a little bit different than in years past, and something to be paying attention to, because if you have the majority of your calls coming at a time when you can expect the majority of your firefighters to not be responding, it does put you in a situation where you need to start looking at how you're responding to calls. So we've done that in a few different ways. You know, we are having the voluntary duty crew that's fully active and really breathing some good life into the department, as well as just increasing our reach in terms of personnel that we are trying to attract to the fire department, those who may have more availability during the day. So, and this is pretty typical year over year. We'll take a spike in the summertime months. People are just out and about and more active, so we'll have higher call volume, and then also increasing into December. And what do you attribute that to? I don't know, the stress of end of year stuff and the holidays, and then it always takes a drop off in January. So that's a fairly typical breakdown there of calls per month. So like I said, we do have our voluntary duty crew program, which is in full swing. And like I said, it's really breathing some awesome energy and life into the department just to have people there more often. And of course, the major benefit is that we are out the door faster and we are on scene sooner. So it is a voluntary duty crew program, so we don't require members to sign up for shifts. We just invite them to sign up. So our fill rate there you can see is 50%, which is actually feeling pretty good. So 50% of the shifts that we have out there and available for folks, we are in fact filling. And then the way that transpires into our response, you can see our average in-service time there is much faster than our overall in-service time, as well as our on-scene. So the benefits of even a voluntary duty crew program are right there in front of you, and really makes our response that much better. Even if we have one or two voluntary firefighters on their voluntary duty shift, and they're only waiting for one additional paid on-call firefighter or maybe two additional paid on-call firefighters, that as well enhances our response time. So good benefits coming from the duty crew program. There's the breakdown. So we did pay attention to what calls we responded to when we had a duty crew in place versus not. And there's the breakdown per month of calls that we responded to with duty crews in play. All right, so in 2024, some milestones that our firefighters had. We had 3 retirements: Eric Palmer, 13 years, Paul Balmer with 20 years, and of course Tom Aldridge with a big 35 years. He was a pillar of our department, as you guys all know, and he did finally retire last year. So sad to see all 3 of those gentlemen go. But in their place, we did bring in 6 probationary firefighters, like I said, and here are those folks. And they're all actively working through their classes, the firefighter classes and the EMS classes, and will likely come off probation here in 2025. And in 24, we did have 2 probationary members come off of probation and become full-fledged members. So Jesse Fow and Lance Swearingen are our newest members. Other milestones in 2024, the big ones on top there: 21 years of service for Jeff Kroll and Ted Wychak. 15 years of service for Ryan Gonger, Ryan Knivey, and myself, Cody Farley. 10 years of service for John Paskowitz, Matt Smiley, and Zach Burbig. In more picturesque form. And then our annual fun dates, the first one coming up here, May 4th, the Pancake Breakfast, always a big event. We're getting geared up for that right now. And then in the summertime, we'll have our 5K fun run. And then in the fall, Fire Prevention Open House. And then finally, the annual toy drive with Santa paying a visit to Long Lake Station 1, second Saturday in December.
Nice.
You guys have any questions?
Great presentation. Do we know if the cost of syrup, if the syrup costs are going to go up for the pancake breakfast yet, or?
I think we're sticking with the Goodwill donation, so that's up to you.
Okay, that's right. Okay, good. Oh, great to see all the years of service that's put in there and amongst you and others. Appreciate that. It looks like we're at, so if I did the active members, that does not include the probationary members, so that'd be 38 plus 6, it'd be 44 if you include the probationary members. Did I do that right?
Nope, they're included in that 38. They are active.
Oh, they are,
members.
okay.
Yep. So once they are accepted by the council, we give them a pager and expect them to start responding to calls. And they're doing an appropriate level of effort on any of those given calls. So sometimes it's just being observant and watching. Sometimes it's helping us haul tools and things like that. But they are actively responding to calls. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Got it. Other questions or comments from folks? Yeah, I heard that was a pretty big grass fire last week on Thursday, so thanks for all of the department's efforts on that. And we could have gotten pretty bad if it crossed County Road 24, and thankful it didn't.
Yes, thankfully. Yeah, we figured it burned about 20 acres, but just grass and trees. So
That's good.
How did you guys slow it?
well, a lot of hands, a lot of water, a lot of marching through the grasslands there. But yeah, it's a combination of, sometimes you can get close enough to spray water on it. We did have probably 5 or 6 ATVs out there, so portable water driving actually through the swamp and spraying water where they can. Backpack blowers actually are very effective with grass fires, and So are rakes and swatters, and we have all kinds of different tools that we can employ to put out grass fires in remote areas like that. So.
Did you create a barrier?
Yeah, we had apparatus all the way around it, and we slowly all just marched that fire line and kind of worked our way in to extinguish it, and yeah, prevented it from jumping any of those roads, which is great. It would have been a different story had it gotten into Baker Park there. That could have been a different kind of battle, but yeah, thankfully everybody came together and worked hard and got it extinguished. Really, grass fires are they're the feel-good fires for the fire industry, right? We get to be out there doing what we do, using our tools and our skills, and hopefully, knock on wood, all that's in danger is grass. So, yeah.
So what happened to the Homestead fire? What was the Homestead fire?
Oh, so the grass fire was on Homestead
It's the
Drive.
same
Okay.
thing.
Homestead and 24 was the intersection. It was
Okay.
the southeast corner from there.
Well, we hope the morale's continue to go as good as it can be in the department. We know you guys have been through a lot over the last few years, like we've been through a lot, and we've been fighting to, kind of bring a resolution to that, and you've probably been following. We've been having really discussions with Orono and their two appointed council members too. Along with Councilmember Divik and I had discussions we've been having about the future of fire in our communities and for the rest of the year and going forward from there. So we're getting close to having, I think, something to work out there, which is positive. And I don't know if anybody else wants to say anything about that, but with Assistant Chief Farley here.
No, other than I attended, Orno had a work session last week where, and I guess I should start, Mayor Thunheim and Minor and council members Divik and Pershing have been doing a fantastic job working to work with the fire departments, both of Orno and of Long Lake, which the men and women of both departments are doing a great job serving this entire community as a whole. And it sounds like that you got 4 of you have been getting together to work on basically the next 9 months, what that's going to look like, and then as well as after the contract ends. And it sounds like Orno's going to be having some discussions next Monday about that. But my understanding is that pretty much all revolves around the next 9 months, us working together more collaboratively and what that's going to look like. And then following that 9 months where we're going to get a lot of input from both cities, the citizens, councils, all the stakeholders in this are going to have an opportunity to see what that looks like going forward. But it sounds like for the next 9 months, we'll definitely be working in more of a close proximity to one another and working together. So.
Yep, and the firefighters are definitely looking forward to having a voice at that table.
Absolutely,
Yep,
absolutely.
To
No.
bring their experience and their ideas to the table when it comes time to talk about our future and the direction that we're ultimately going to go. So,
I think the most important voice at that table, for sure, the most knowledgeable. So.
yep. Yeah, but within the fire department, we're doing everything we can to keep the best ship that we can, and we did have a lot that we accomplished in the past year, despite everything else going on. Got a laundry list here of accomplishments from last year. So we replaced our engine 11. We purchased a fire engine from Excelsior, and we also outfitted it completely with new tools and sold the old engine. So that was a very big, much needed step forward, a good improvement there.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
What's
sure.
the number of that one? The Excelsior engine. Does it have a number?
Currently,
Yes.
it's engine 11. Yeah. So it's a funny discussion around the fire department because not all fire departments operate that way. They'll give a new truck a new number, but then everybody has to reprogram their brains, right? When I go to the fire station, I get on the first truck out, I get on engine 11, but it's not engine 11 anymore. So we try to minimize the additional thought required to do the difficult jobs that we have to do. So no sense in giving it a new number. Let's just keep calling that first out engine 11. So it is our only engine 11 now because the old one's gone. So
So who did you guys sell it to?
it went to an organization that refurbishes fire trucks and then they resell them. They're out of, I believe, northwestern Wisconsin. We put it up for auction, so highest bidder got it. Other things that we did, we put all new tires on Tanker 11. That's 10 tires. We had a new suspension put on Utility 11, which breathed some much needed new life back into that apparatus. All the HVAC systems at Station 1 were gone through and revamped. The generators, we have generators at Station 1 and Station 2. They were both gone through, inspected, and some long-standing needed improvements were made with those. There's a furnace that heats the southern side of Station 1, the extra rooms at the other end of the apparatus bay. That was fixed up and taken care of. All new parking lot lights went in at Station 1. Yeah, so lots of good things came out of last year. Some things that were just outstanding and needed to be taken care of. And so all those things just help to build a better, stronger house, which feels better to serve in. So lots of good things happening.
I was down at Station 2 on Friday with Chief Farley and Chief Highland, and gave me a tour. I hadn't been in there in 3 or 4 years, and it really looked nice. Like, I think it's Captain Wycheck that's kind of in charge of Station 2, right? And he's done a great job with this team of just, it looks warm and inviting and clean and everything. So I was
Yeah,
happy to see
absolutely.
that.
Doing some nice work down there, and our auxiliary has helped us out in doing that. And up at Station 1 as well, they've gone through our lounge area and helped us spruce that up and make it more inviting and comfortable for people to just hang out in. Now that we have people hanging out at the station more often, serving on duty crews and things. So I got a new couch and put a new TV on the wall for us. There's a little fireplace in there now, so it's pretty cozy.
Yeah.
How'd the numbers for the blood drive turn out?
It was full. It's packed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got a
Yep.
little of mine, but.
Yep, the community really stepped up for that one, which was great.
Good.
All in honor of Weston Paskowitz, who continues to do a great job fighting his fight.
Good.
Awesome. All right, any other comments or questions for Chief Farley?
Nice job.
Great, yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, on to item 8, other business. Go around the dais here. Councilmember Newcomer.
No, you know what, I was gonna, since we're on the same topic of fire, the chief presented, I guess he had a company come in, maybe give an offer on looking over all the facilities. Were we gonna readdress that at some point, or I can't remember how we ended up on that?
I thought he was going to report back on what the recommendations were, but that's the last I heard. I don't know if you guys have heard anything.
Yeah, so it was gonna go on a work session, cause I believe it was like a $10,000 assessment or
Yeah,
something,
one
and
time.
then you wanted to see what the scope was, and we wanted to at least, bring it to the city. We didn't know if we wanted to bring it to the fire advisory board first, so who would make the financial decision on that?
So that's still in play?
It's still in play, yep.
Okay, all
Yep,
right.
but it's gonna wanna be needed anyways for our next future talks anyways, so I mean, I just wanna see where we wanna put in front of and who, wants to
Yeah,
support it, et
It
cetera.
just seemed like a fairly, kind of a good tool to have.
Well, they'll have results that will come out of that too, that, should determine what we may need to put more money into the future, so when we're talking about future capital and all that stuff, that we have at least maybe a path forward, so.
No surprises.
Correct.
Exactly.
All right, anything else? All right. Councilmember Feldman.
I'm good, thank you.
Councilmember Dybek.
Nothing for me.
All right. Yeah, nothing else for me either.
Nothing for me.
Wow.
I'm good.
Yep, nothing for me.
All right. Cody, anything else? Last minute? All right. So our next meeting is Tuesday, April 1st. I think at least one council member will be absent.
Be out, yes.
Okay, anybody else plan on being absent? All right, so we'll have enough for a quorum then. So that'll be 2 weeks from today, and potentially a work session as well. All right, well, if there is no objection, I'll adjourn the meeting. Hearing none, meeting is adjourned at 7:18 PM. Good night.